I was just desperate for a job, and where I live the job market is terrible. Then on Facebook I saw someone post something about a job. This woman wanted someone to stay at her house to be her son's alarm clock. Her son Billy couldn't get woken by an alarm, and so needed someone to really nudge him awake. The mother was always working. I responded and got the job straight away, and it was hand cash, and any time her son Billy falls asleep, it was my job to wake him up. The house wasn't very clean, and the mother looked extremely depressed. Her son Billy was always quiet and staring at the wall, and I was only working for 5 hours a day. Every time Billy closed his eyes, I shook him until he opened his eyes again, but he always seemed to be in pain when I woke him up. He never spoke a word or moved around a lot, but really just wanted to go to sleep. After the first week of nudging and shaking Billy to always stay awake, I got a phone call from a man. He sounded angry, confused, concerned, and I came to learn that he was the father of Billy but was divorced from the mother. He kept telling me to get out, and I asked why, and he told me, "Billy, my son, died a month ago, but my wife won't bury him." My heart froze, and every hair on my body stood up, and I just got out of the house as quickly as I could and never went back. I remember waking up early morning, and when I looked out of my window, I saw a man standing on the edge of a bridge, ready to jump off onto the coming speeding traffic. He just stood there with the most saddest face I have ever seen. And then a man wearing an orange jumper was walking through the bridge and stopped, as he spotted the suicidal man ready to jump. I was relieved that someone had come to stop the suicidal man from jumping off the bridge and onto the speeding traffic, but I was surprised all of a sudden to witness that the man in the orange jumper had pushed the suicidal man off from the bridge and onto the speeding traffic. I heard the cars beeping and cars crashing, and the man wearing the orange jumper just simply walked on. I met a family who ate pretend imaginary food, and how I got to meet them was through their generosity. I had been homeless for a number of years, and starvation is one of the realities of homelessness. The father of the household saw me starving on the street and came to me in my last hour of need and invited me into his house. He lived in a pretty large house and had a nice wife and 2 kids. When it was dinner time, I noticed all of the plates and cutlery were set up except for the food. I thought it was some cruel joke, but they demanded that I sit down and to be patient. Then they all started eating pretend food, and it just looked so weird how they were eating, and I thought they were insane. Then I started to smell food, and it was coming from their plates and mine, even though nothing was present on my plate. As I picked up my knife and fork and pretended to cut into the pretend steak and chips, which was what they told me they were eating, I could taste and feel the pretend meat in my mouth, and I could actually taste it. It tasted amazingly good. For that whole week, I just ate pretend food on my plate and drank pretend water, which was refreshing. When I went back to being homeless, and when I tried eating real food and drinks given to me by people, I would become extremely sick. I would also puke all over the floor, and I desperately tried to go back to that house. As I watched them eat pretend food and drinks, I needed to eat. It felt like death was onto me, and I was gratefully let back in. We were all eating pretend lamb and drinking pretend drinks, and it was all amazing. Pretend food is so much better than real food, and you don't need to cook or kill something to make it. Then, as I was eating my pretend lamb, all of a sudden it turned into real lamb, and the whole family looked at me in confusion. I tried eating the real lamb, but it just made me incredibly sick to the point where I couldn't stand. Any pretend food I was given on a plate turned real and was just making me more sicker. Then I thought about pretending to eat the family as a last resort, and as I got a plate out, I pretended to eat the meat and flesh from the father. I pretended to eat him whole, and he wasn't around the house anymore after I had finished. His wife wanted me out and was incredibly disgusted with me for pretending to eat her husband. I then started to pretend to eat both her children until they were no more. The wife sobbed and cried for her whole family, and I tried to pretend to eat normal chicken, lamb, and steak, but they always turned real. Real food was disgusting to me now. I like to pretend that I am eating people, and I am good at that. I am a job hopper, but not by choice. For those of you that don't know what the term job hopper means, it's basically a term used for someone who keeps leaving one good full-time progressive job to another full-time job. Job hoppers seem to keep letting go of jobs and finding another job to work at after a couple of months, maybe even shorter. There could be many reasons why people hop from one job to another, and it could be boredom, bad treatment, and just needing a new experience. I decided to leave education at the age of 18, and I remember a week after leaving full-time education, when I awoke from a good night's sleep, I found myself at some retail job. I was even wearing the uniform and everything. I seemed to know what to do. Every coworker that worked there knew me. I really don't know what happened, but after 3 months working in a retail store, when I went to bed, I awoke at a different job. I didn't like retail, especially the customers, the amounts of products you have to try and sell, and not forgetting the targets. The managers were also difficult to work with. My next job, though, this time was in a cash processing job, which is basically a factor for counting money to be put back into a cash machine and also into people's accounts. I kind of enjoyed this surprising job hopping strangeness, and I enjoyed meeting different people. I loved to learn new things and being part of the team, although I did start to dislike the cash processing job, with the amount of money you had to count by using the machine and then wrapping it up into a cage. It was a job which had a lot of pressure. It was extremely dusty and felt like I was in prison because there were so many cameras, and the amount of checks you need to go through every day was annoying. I worked in a cash center for 4 months, and after 4 months, as I went to bed, I awoke at a different job with a different uniform. I was a security guard this time for a construction firm, which meant I didn't have to do much apart from closing and opening gates, telling workers, drivers, and visitors where to go park their cars. It was definitely the most boring job I have ever had, and also the hours were long, although I didn't mind it as it was an easy job. I worked as a security guard for 5 months, and when I went to bed and I found myself at a much different workplace this time. I was a truck driver this time, driving a truck in the middle of the night. I knew where I was going and what to do. Being a truck driver was extremely long and tiring. I tried leaving the job, but every time I went to sleep, I would find myself back in the truck. And it went like this for a tiresome long 6 months. Truck drivers driving all day long into the night, and you don't get much time to do what you want. After 6 months, I awoke and found myself working as a pilot, but I knew what to do. Being in the sky and driving the plane, it got me thinking as to how and why I keep job hopping like this. I actually enjoyed being a pilot though, and it was actually my best job that I have ever had. Although after 7 months working as a pilot, something went wrong, and the most frightening thing happened when I found out that there were terrorists on the plane that I was flying. Everyone was petrified, and the bomb was actually set off, and all I remember was the plane falling from such a high place in the sky, with fire blazing everywhere. I then found myself at another job in the blink of an eye, and it was as a prison guard this time. I hated being a prison guard, and dealing with violent and verbally abusive prisoners was not good at all. Just the very atmosphere in prisons were terrible, and the fierce competition between workers to get up the ladder was extremely competitive. I started wishing that my next hop would be in some awesome job like a famous actor, singer, race driver, and something with more success. I was getting tired of these normal jobs and the mundane responsibilities. For 8 months, I dealt with so much stress, worry, and tension working as a prison guard. Then, just as when I had thought that nothing could get worse, it did. A gang of prisoners somehow managed to break out of their cells and took down some prison guards. These escaped prisoners were doing time for murder, and they robbed the weapons from the guards. All I remember were gunshots being fired, and in an instant I found myself at a different job. I was a soldier now and in the scorching hot Middle East. I started to realize I am job hopping to more dangerous and life-threatening jobs. The Middle East was hot, dangerous, and just constant tension and paranoia. I saw so many terrible things with the amount of people being killed, both civilians and soldiers. The days were long and the nights were just humid, and I found it hard to sleep just knowing it could all go wrong so quickly. I remember being awoken by my colleague and was told that terrorists had found out where we were hiding. There were so many gunshots and bombs going off, it was an absolute massacre. I remember being shot in the chest, and then I seemed to have hopped to another job. This time I found myself wrapped up in some operating table and observing the place I was at. It was some sort of experimentation lab. I was a guinea pig, a test subject, and let me tell you, I would have done anything to go back to being a soldier in the Middle East. This crazy scientist did all sorts of things to me by injecting all sorts of chemicals and medications he had made and put into my body. I was in so much pain, misery, and desperate need of saving. Then when the scientist tried to perform a tricky surgery on my body, and I don't know what he was trying to do, I ended up back in my room. I was 26 now, and I had somehow job hopped to so many jobs and have experienced so many things. This could be my sort of break or holiday from the job hopping, but they are becoming dangerous. Although ever since arriving home, I can hear screams and fire all in one. After hearing those sounds for a couple of days now, I can assume where my next job hop is going to be. A place where extremely hot fire makes people scream. I don't like this job hopping anymore. It's not exciting nor fun. You gotta keep on smiling. Always keep on smiling, my mother kept on telling me. I remember the storm which took out our electricity, and we resorted to candlelights as our only source of lighting. We had food supplies for such strong storms, and there was a bad flooding as well outside. We also had our two cousins and their mother who was staying with us till the storm ended. My auntie's two sons were about the same age as me, around 13 to 17. I remember me and my two cousins Rodney and Sean were all sleeping even though we could all hear the storm outside. And then, all of a sudden, my mother and father woke me up telling me to always keep smiling. I have a little 10-year-old brother who started to become scared as my parents were telling us to always keep on smiling. My auntie was also telling her two boys to always keep on smiling, and no matter how painful it gets, we had to keep on smiling. We didn't understand what was going on, and why we had to keep on smiling, and it was hard to show a smile with the storm causing such destruction and panic outside. Then out of nowhere the muscles on my face started twitching, and I was smiling without my consent. And this was the same with everyone else in my house. My mother said to all of us that our bodies will only help us smile for 30 minutes, and after 30 minutes it is just down to our own free will to keep our smile going, no matter how hard things get, emotionally and psychologically. My mother, father, and auntie had this worried look at the same time. My mother, father, and auntie had this worried look at the same time, and I could clearly tell they had experienced this before, because they knew what to do. There was this silence in my house apart from the noise being made by the storm outside, and all of us had this fake smile on our faces, which our body was making. The 30 minutes was nearly running out, though. Something was really weird and off, and my little brother seemed completely uncomfortable and didn't want to smile anymore, but my mother kept on telling him that he better hold his smile after the 30 minutes. When the 30 minutes passed, the amount of strength it took to keep our smile alive was immense, and even my little brother managed to keep his smile going, but I could sense the struggle. "Everyone keep on smiling, it will be over soon," my mother kept on saying with a smile on her face. My father managed to make our house disaster-proof from flooding and strong winds, but never invested in a backup generator if the power went out. Damn father. I was becoming tired of holding my smile, and I told my mother I wanted my face to be normal, and my mother angrily, but with a smile on her face, shouted at me, "Keep smiling, boy." My little brother went into the kitchen, and after a couple of minutes he fell to the ground, and when my mother, father, and auntie went into the kitchen, all I heard was, my beautiful boy had stopped smiling. And when I and my two cousins went into the kitchen, my brother wasn't alive anymore. He was dead, and his body had rotten much quicker than usual, all because he couldn't hold his smile. I could tell my mother and father wanted to scream and cry, but they held it inside while still smiling and telling all of us to keep on smiling no matter how painful it gets. My little brother's body was put in the attic, and we were all in the living room smiling, but I could tell my mother wanted to cry so badly. Then all of a sudden I could hear my bullies in school teasing me and just making my life miserable all of the time, but it felt more painful and more scary. I wanted to break down, but I had to keep on smiling, and my mother could tell I was starting to struggle to keep my smile alive, and she forcefully told me, "Keep on smiling, boy. I've already lost one son, and I am not losing another," she told me with a struggling smile. Then Rodney started to struggle, and his smile was breaking down, and he started confessing that he was in a lot of emotional and psychological pain. My auntie was telling him to keep strong, and as she was saying this, she too had a smile on her face, but clearly was struggling. I kept feeling the pain that I feel when my bullies were bullying me at school, but the pain is amplified for some reason, and it's like something is messing with my mind. I could sense that something wanted to break my smile. Then I looked at Rodney, and his smile broke, and when it broke, his whole muscle on his face looked like it had melted, and his body turned rotten. My auntie held him in her hands while still smiling and talking to dead Rodney. "Why did you stop smiling, Rodney? Why?" And his dead body was also put into the attic. The storm outside was only getting stronger, and we put out more candles. It was a weird place to be in my home in that moment, and everyone had a fake smile on their faces, and I could clearly tell that they were all in such emotional and psychological pain. Then Sean started to struggle with his smile, and my auntie grabbed him by his arm and told him to keep strong, and that she didn't want to lose another son. Sean kept on complaining that the longer he kept on smiling, the more emotional pain he felt inside, and it was like something was trying to break him. My mother then started to struggle to keep her smile, and she just wanted to mourn for my little brother who was now dead. Then randomly, my mother jumped, dancing around and singing random songs because she was feeling the immense pressure and weight to keep on smiling. My auntie also joined in the dancing and prancing around, and it was just so weird, and my father was just smiling, but it looked so wrong that he had something to hide. I just kept telling myself to keep on smiling and never stop smiling. And as Sean looked at me directly, I witnessed him break down and he stopped smiling. He dropped dead with his body rotting so quickly. My auntie stopped and still had a smile on her face, while knowing she had lost 2 sons. Her smile was breaking, and my mother supported her and kept telling her to keep her smile. My auntie just sat down in a corner and started to cry with a smile on her face. Then silence came over all of us, and then my mother started to cry and scream for her little boy, and my auntie did the same for her 2 dead sons. My father let go of his smile, and I felt this weight, which had possessed me before, just disappearing, and I knew I could let go of my smile. I started to cry, and we were all in the living room with 3 dead bodies in our attic, and the storm was still brewing outside.